tell you a little secret. I used to really suck at putting up boundaries. I'm just a Midwestern, firstborn, people-pleasing girl that had to learn a lot about boundaries. And teaching was such a great learning experience. Whether you're learning how to make boundaries or strengthening the boundaries you've already made, this video is for you. Welcome back to Educator University. I'm Annie. Let's get into it. At one point, I found it very difficult to communicate my boundaries in a way that was effective and professional. I oftentimes would take on things that I shouldn't have because I was afraid of saying no. In my journey to make this job more sustainable, I have found and created more and more boundaries. I have a video that I'll link above that talks about boundaries and their connection to burnout. And in this video, I want to focus more on how do you communicate those boundaries once you've defined them. For me, I found one of the best ways to communicate boundaries is by asking a question, because questions really put you in a position of power, and they also are effective in making the person who's asking you the question or asking you to do something to ask something of themselves. These questions didn't just come out of thin air. It took me a long time to develop them. And what I realized, there's kind of a formula for questions. The formula that I found is a question plus an assumption. For example, in the scenario where someone says, hey, will you run this committee? And the question is, what is the allotted budget you have for this position? You're asking a question, but you're also giving them an assumption. You're giving the person asking an assumption that you will need to be paid for extra work. And that kind of changes the conversation because it puts the ball in the other person's court. If the answer is there's no pay, then it's like, well, may not be the right fit for me. I'm looking for something compensated. Or it's more awkward for the person to answer with that answer. Oh, we weren't going to give any extra additional pay. I find that the question plus an assumption does seem to work pretty well. I don't think this is a new concept in life. I'm sure people have used it before. Like, let's say you want to go out to eat, but you're not sure if your significant other does. And so instead of saying, do you want to go out to eat? You say, do you want to go get Japanese food or barbecue? And then it's like, oh, well, those are the two options that I have. This is not a new concept, but I think in education, it's good to be reminded of it because I know for me, it took a long time to figure this out. I want to break down creating these questions as easy as possible. Like I said before, I had to practice putting these together before I actually had the courage to say them out loud. So these words will be helpful for you as you formulate your questions. Some of the words are budget, allocated, responsibilities, fund, position, time, compensation. Those words with the appropriate questions will really help communicate your boundaries in a professional and effective way. You got to do it your way. If this wording doesn't sound right to you and you have a different way of doing it, you go for you. I'm just sharing with you what I've seen work for me and fellow teachers around me that have tried this technique. What I would suggest, if you have time, is to play around with the sentence frame and word bank that I have here to create questions that you feel confident with, and then practice saying them to yourself. I know this sounds silly, but if you're really struggling with this, practice saying them out loud. Unfortunately, in education, I've found in my experience that it's not an if someone's going to ask you to do something that's crossing a professional boundary, it's kind of a when. When you're thinking about that decision to speak up for yourself, realize that you're speaking up for yourself, which is the most important. But as a whole, we as teachers all need to stand up together and say, this is a profession just like any other, and we deserve compensation. We deserve time or resources for any extra work that is given to us. I think the more we stand together and do this, the more respect this profession will be given. If you haven't watched my video about how boundaries connect to burnout, I'll link that right here, and I'll see you in the next video.